Hello, my name is Sativ, and in this video we're going to learn everything you need to know about Subtlety rogues in the Legion expansion. From artifact weapon to honor talents, and everything in between, this video will provide you with all the information you'll be looking for heading into Legion. First we're going to look at our abilities, things that have been replaced, removed, or reworked. Then we'll take a look at our talents, talk about their strengths and their weaknesses in each tier. From there we'll move into honor talents, talking a little bit about each talent. From there we'll talk about the artifact weapon and the perks that it provides you. Then finally we'll talk a little bit about openers and playstyle, as well as some tips and tricks that I picked up playing on the Legion beta. Let's get started with the basics, abilities and passives. A lot of skills for Subtlety have been reworked or straight up removed. We're going to get started with the skills that have been removed. Gouge, Garrote, Shiv, and Hemorrhage have been removed from Subtlety and are available only to other specs. Skills like Crimson Tempest and Preparation have been removed. Passives like Sanguinary Vein, Swiftblade's Cunning, and Sinister Calling have also been removed. Draenor perks have been merged with the abilities they affected or removed. Now let's talk about skills that have been reworked. Rupture is now Nightblade, a magical damage over time effect. Causes all your attacks to slow the affected target by 50%, 70% through talents. The spell can be dispelled by healers, removed by Cloak of Shadows, or other skills that clear magical effects. Nightblade deals significant damage, and should be kept up with max combo points after you open. Not a bad idea to spread it to multiple targets either. Next is Slice and Dice and Symbols of Death. This ability increases your damage by 20% for 35 seconds. It only costs energy and not combo points, and can only be used from stealth. It also causes your next Shadow Strike to Critical Strike, and has a 10-second cooldown. You should be aiming to have Symbols of Death active at all times. Shadow Dance has been completely reworked. It now has 3 charges on a 1-minute recharge, but only lasts 3 seconds. Its duration can be increased through talents and PvP talents. Shadow Dance no longer shares with the stealth action bar, so you will need to have Cheap Shot and Shadow Strike on your non-stealth action bar. Our next skill is Fan of Knives, which has been replaced by Shuriken Storm. Shuriken Storm generates 1 combo point per target that it hits. This does not include lesser minions like Wild Imps or Army of the Dead. Recuperate has been replaced by Crimson Vial. It costs 30 energy and no combo points, has a 30-second cooldown, and heals you for a substantial amount of your HP. Shuriken Toss is now passive and no longer a talent. Premeditation is now a talent and has been reworked. Ambush has been replaced by Shadow Strike. Shadow Strike has a 25-yard range and teleports you behind your target. This causes Subtlety rogues to have crazy uptime on ranged casters. Next we'll talk about some of the new abilities and passives for Subtlety rogue. An old classic, Shadow Blades, has been returned to sub. This spell is a 3-minute cooldown that causes all your attacks to generate an additional combo point. Also causes all auto attacks to deal shadow damage. Deepening Shadows is a passive that causes all finishers to lower the cooldown on Shadow Dance by 3 per combo point spent. Shadow Techniques. Shadow Techniques gives your auto attacks a chance to generate a combo point. Generally, you can expect 1 combo point per 5 auto attacks. Now let's take a moment to evaluate the talents. Let's get started with the first row of talents. Master of Subtlety, Weapon Master, and Gloomblade. Master of Subtlety increases damage by 10% while stealthed, and for 6 seconds after breaking stealth. This talent triggers from Shadow Dance, and is personally my favorite choice in this tier. Weapon Master gives all your abilities a 6% chance to hit a second time, kind of like old school multi-strike, but it deals 100% of the damage. Granted, it's only a 6% chance, so I wouldn't really depend on it. Gloomblade, it turns your backstab into shadow damage and increases the damage of backstab by about 20%. Next up, the level 30 tier, the old stealth tier, is still the same, only it now affects Shadow Dance. So Nightstalker gives you the increased movement speed and increased damage while dancing. Subterfuge allows you to have access to your stealth abilities for 3 seconds after breaking stealth, and it also increases the duration of Shadow Dance by 2 seconds. And Shadow Focus reduces the energy cost of your skills while dancing or in stealth. At the 45 tier we have Deeper Stratagem, Anticipation, and Vigor. Deeper Stratagem allows you to have 6 combo points, and increases the damage of your finishing moves by 10%. This talent will increase the duration of your kidney shot by 1 second if used with 6 combo points, but is mostly used for the damage increase on your abilities. Anticipation allows you to have a maximum of 8 combo points, but still only allows you to spend 5 of them at a time. And Vigor increases your maximum energy by 50, and energy regeneration by 10%. The level 60 tier is your defensive tier. Soothing Darkness, Elusiveness, and Cheat Death. Cheat Death is still very lackluster, and through my experiences on the beta, the only time Cheat Death was worthwhile was when skills were bugged and hitting me from 100% to 0. But outside of that, when it triggers, you're still pretty easy to kill, and I feel Elusiveness provides better damage mitigation at all times, and still remains the superior choice for organized PvP. But for dueling, battlegrounds, and world PvP, Soothing Darkness can be an incredible competitor with Elusiveness, and Soothing Darkness is definitely my favorite choice for non-organized PvP. Level 75, Tangled Shadows, Prey on the Weak, and Strike from Shadows. Strike from Shadows now causes your Shadow Strike to daze players for 5 seconds. The stun aspect of it doesn't trigger against players. Prey on the Weak now increases damage by 10% on targets affected by Cheap Shot and Kidney Shot. This increases damage of your teammates as well, and personally I feel is the best choice in this tier. But for 1v1, Tangled Shadows could be a very solid choice. It makes your Nightblade slow go from 50% up to 70%. The level 90 tier has Premeditation, Alacrity, and Enveloping Shadows. Premeditation will cause your Cheap Shot and Shadow Strike to generate an additional combo point. Alacrity will give you a 1% haste bonus stacking 20 times whenever you use a finishing move. And Enveloping Shadows is a new finishing move that will generate 1 combo point every 3 seconds. Personally, I feel Premeditation is the smoothest one for PvP, though the other two options might be good in other scenarios. But Premeditation is my talent of choice in this tier. Moving on to level 100, we have Master of Shadows, Marked for Death, and Death from Above. Master of Shadows generates 30 energy whenever you enter stealth or activate Shadow Dance, which helps you smooth out your rotation by giving you lots of energy to play with. Marked for Death remains the same, but only gives 5 combo points even when spec'd into deeper stratagem, so I feel Marked for Death is kind of a weird talent at the moment. Death from Above is actually nerfed in PvP. It only does 25% increased damage on the Eviscerate instead of 50. Death from Above is a pretty solid choice, but Master of Shadows has its perks as well. I feel Master of Shadows is definitely solid if you're running the high energy build, which I'll talk about later in the playstyle section. Well, that wraps up the talents for now. Let's move on to the Honor talents. In Legion, once you hit level 110, you will start earning Honor. Honor can be used to level up your character and improve your PvP performance. The first row of talents that you get relatively quickly, but once you hit level 50, you will have access to the entire tree. Let's go ahead and take a look at all of the Honor talents that are available to Subtlety, and I'll talk a little bit about how I feel about them individually. So the first row of talents are basically your PvP trinket, or a variation of your PvP trinket. Gladiator's Medallion is a 2-minute cooldown which removes all CC effects on you. Anyone who's PvP'd in previous expansions knows that your PvP trinket is something that is very important to a rogue and should not be wasted, because oftentimes rogues are pretty easy to kill if they don't have their trinket. Adaption replaces your trinket and automatically uses it if you are struck by any crowd control effect that lasts longer than 5 seconds, but it only has a 1-minute cooldown. Granted, this one here can be a huge risk, because if somebody just hits you with a polymorph, your trinket will automatically be used, then you can be swapped to with a stun and killed relatively easily. Relentless reduces the duration of all incoming crowd control effects by 25%. I should mention here that this does stack with the Orc racial, making stuns 45% shorter on you if you are an Orc. This completely replaces your PvP trinket and is also kind of risky. The second row of talents are all defensively orientated as well. Hardiness will reduce damage taken by 20% while you are above 80% HP. Reinforced Armor will increase your health by 10%, pretty straightforward. And Sparring. Physical melee attacks have a 20% chance to be blunted, dealing 50% reduced damage. Now, I'm not sure if this is just melee strikes, like melee auto attacks, or if it actually can reduce things like Mortal Strike or Executes. I'm not really sure. I haven't had a chance to actually sit down and test it with somebody, but personally I feel Hardiness is definitely a solid choice. The third tier is Maneuverability, Silhouette, and Cut to the Chase. Maneuverability gives your sprint a freedom effect. Now keep in mind it's only things like Crippling Poison or Hamstring. It doesn't suppress roots, so if you're Frost Nova'd in place, this doesn't have any effect when you sprint. But if you're being kited by, let's say, a Frostbolt Slow or a Hamstring, then Maneuverability will suppress all those movement impairing effects. Silhouette reduces the cooldown on Shadow Step by 50% when you use it on a friendly player. If you have to Shadow Step back to your healer to avoid being killed, it'll leave your Shadow Step with a 15-second cooldown instead of 30, which is pretty awesome, honestly, from a defensive point of view. And Cut to the Chase. If nearby enemies within 10 yards move faster than you at any given time, you match their movement speed and exceed it by 5% for 3 seconds. I feel like Cut to the Chase is most definitely a solid choice. I really enjoy using it, but Maneuverability in conjunction with the new artifact Sprint talent is definitely a really cool choice, which I'll talk a little bit more about later in this video. Shadow's Caress increases the rate at which all your abilities recover their cooldown. So while you're shadow dancing or while you're in stealth, your abilities are 30% shorter CD. This is definitely a solid choice, especially if you're running the long Shadow Dance build, which I'll talk about a little bit more coming up in the playstyle section. Honor Amongst Thieves is a pretty solid choice. You can trigger Honor Amongst Thieves yourself as well. Smoke Bomb is a talent now. We have to pick between these two or Smoke Bomb. Smoke Bomb definitely has its uses still. It's a solid choice. Shadow's Caress, also really solid, and Honor Amongst Thieves, fantastic as well. So I feel like this whole row really depends on what kind of role you need to be fitting in an arena situation, or just your personal playstyle preference. Veil of Midnight is kind of a bunk talent. I don't really feel it's that useful. It gives you 100% dodge for 2 seconds when you exit stealth or Shadow Dance, when you fade from Shadow Dance. So that dodge chance is nice and all, but definitely Cold Blood is going to take the cake in this tier. It's the best talent in the tier for sure. Whenever you use Cheap Shot or Shadow Strike, it will deal 13% of the target's maximum HP as shadow damage. It has a 45-second cooldown, and most definitely is a solid talent choice. Dagger in the Dark will increase the damage of your next Shadow Strike by 10%, stacking 10 times, while you're in stealth. This is kind of a wonky talent. I feel like these two talents could definitely use a bit of love or maybe a rework, because Cold Blood is just far superior to both of them in every way. In the final tier we have Phantom Assassin, which will increase the duration of Shadow Dance by 3 seconds, and you will automatically gain Symbols of Death whenever you enter stealth. This is a solid choice if you're running the long dance spec, which I'll talk about later in the video. Personally though, I really enjoy using Thief's Bargain. It gives you a 30-second cooldown. That's right, 30-second cooldown on Vanish, but it reduces your maximum HP by 25%. On top of the 30-second cooldown Vanish, you also gain 20% damage while shadow dancing or in stealth. Shadowy Duel is a very interesting talent. It will phase you and your target out of sight from your teammates and their teammates. You basically take them into the Shadow Realm, Yu-Gi-Oh style, and lay the pound on them. It's a very fun talent to use. I haven't got a chance to really try it out in coordinated 3v3 arena yet, but this whole row right here has a lot of solid choices, and I look forward to playing around with them on the ladder in rated arena. Well, we're going to move on to the artifact weapon now. We're going to talk a little bit about what kind of perks the artifact weapon has to offer, and examine all the different skills, and I'm going to talk about which ones I plan to level first, because some of them are a lot better than others, and we're going to talk about those now. Gormaw's Bite is your artifact ability. It generates 3 combo points and grants you 30 energy over 6 seconds. It also does a good deal of shadow damage and lowers the target's movement speed by 60% for 8 seconds. It has a 1-minute cooldown. When you first obtain your artifact weapon, you will have access to Gormaw's Bite. From that point onward, all the artifact power that you earn will be spent, on different talents throughout your artifact tier. See, here you can see Gut Ripper will increase the critical strike chance if you eviscerate by 15% once it's maxed Stout. Moving on throughout the tree, There's multiple things like increasing your dodge chance and making you immune to fall damage, increasing the duration of shadow blades, and fancy things like flickering shadows, which will, whenever you activate sprint, as long as you don't take damage for 3 seconds, you will trigger a vanish effect without incurring the cooldown. Let's make our way through the entire tier, starting from Gormaw's Bite, and talk about the road that I'm going to take while leveling my artifact. Now, how you choose to level your artifact weapon is totally up to you, but what I plan to do is talk about certain tiers that I feel are very, very important. The one that I want to talk about first is called Flickering Shadows. Flickering Shadows can be used in all sorts of unique ways. One thing that I've noticed is you can actually sprint and then start capping a flag, and the vanish will trigger, and you will cap the flag in stealth. Granted, we're still in beta, so this might change. Alternatively, in a rogue v rogue, if you expect the rogue to blind you, you can sprint and then vanish the blind. Another one that's worth picking up as soon as possible is Precision Strike, which will increase the damage of your Shadow Strike by 15% once maxed out. Something else that's also a pretty solid one is Energetic Stabbing. Cheap Shot and Shadow Strike have a chance to refund 15 energy. Definitely a solid choice. Demon's Kiss increases the damage of your Nightblade by 15%. Soul Shadows will increase the duration of your Shadow Blades by 10 seconds, which is fantastic. And Finality. Now, Finality is a interesting talent. It will increase the damage of your next Nightblade or Eviscerate by 5% per combo point spent. Now, this is actually reduced by 60% effectiveness in PvP, so when you use a 6-point finisher, it's only around 13%, and for 5-point finishers, I'd say around 9% respectively. So Finality is definitely one that you want to pick up as soon as possible, but its effectiveness is reduced in PvP. The rest of the artifact talents kind of just increase your dodge. Like, we have a bunch of dodge chance here. This one here increases the damage of your backstab. This one here gives you a small shield whenever you enter stealth. Realistically though, the best ones to get are Flickering Shadows, Precision Strikes, Gut Ripper, Energetic Stabbing, Demon's Kiss, Finality, and Soul Shadows. The Shadow Nova can be okay, but it's definitely not as good as Finality or the alternatives. Now that we have a good understanding of all of the choices that are available to us, let's go ahead and start talking about Rogue playstyle in Legion. Here are the basics. You want to keep Symbols of Death active at all times. It increases your damage by a lot and has to be up whenever you're dealing damage. You need to keep Nightblade on your target at all times as well. It is your dedicated slow. Without Nightblade on your target, you cannot slow your enemy. You should be using Nightblade and Eviscerate to lower the cooldown on Shadow Dance as much as possible. Outside of this, a rogue's job is to provide control for the team, as well as substantial damage on demand. So generally speaking, it's a good idea to try and lock your targets down as long as possible with cheap shots and kidney shots while doing as much damage as you can. Most of your damage comes from Nightblade and Shadow Strike. Eviscerate has been toned down in PvP and is pretty lackluster compared to the other two. A basic opener generally looks something like this. Cheap Shot, get full combo points, then Nightblade. Shadow Dance, Cheap Shot again, Shadow Strike to full combo points, and DFA or Eviscerate, depending on your spec. From that point onward, you just want to keep Nightblade up on your target, make sure Symbols of Death is active, and hunt them down with Shadow Strikes. Shadow Strike gives you insane mobility, which allows you to keep up with almost anything in the game, even those pesky Windwalker monks. How you choose to do your talents is up to you, but here's one build that I've really been enjoying playing. I call it the Long Dance build. Shout out to Naj on the Rogue forums for posting this. Basically, this build gives you almost 100% uptime on Shadow Dance as long as you're cycling through combo points, and you have insane mobility. It's pretty broken, to be honest. One thing I don't like though is you don't have Thief's Bargain. I love Thief's Bargain, it's really fun to play with, but I feel this build is probably going to be what people run in threes. The damage you can put out is just absolutely insane, and your uptime is silly. Another build that I've been having a lot of success with when doing duels in World PvP is the Big DFA build. This build utilizes Deeper Stratagem, Death from Above, and Thief's Bargain to make you very, very slippery. You're extremely hard to catch because you have a 30-second cooldown on Vanish, and your Eviscerates hit super hard when you're not in instanced PvP. When you're in instanced PvP, your stats and your damage gets adjusted but when you're dueling and stuff like that, none of that takes effect, so you kind of just destroy things. Well guys, that about sums it up. That's pretty much everything you need to know about Subtlety Rogue as you transition into Legion. If you would like to see more content like this, please do consider supporting the channel. In the description is a donation link if you are the kind of person who's got the funds to do that. These videos take around 20 to 24 hours to make, and that's just solid sitting down and video editing time. It's kind of difficult to weave that in between my work schedule, so I'm trying to get back into full-time video editing, and only way to do it is with your support. The next guide will be the Outlaw Guide. It will be the same thing as this one basically, giving you a full rundown of the spec, and then after that we'll do Assassination. And then from that point onward, we're going to do silly little specific videos on different topics, as well as awesome montages to keep you guys hype for Legion. Thank you very much for watching, and until next time, my name is Sativ, and I want you all to do me one very important favor. Stay sneaky, my friends.